I will be the first to admit this new year has certainly gotten off to a rather rocky start. This week has been particularly brutal. When I've had time to check the news, I feel I may get whiplash from this roller coaster of violence after violence after violence. I feel sad, mad, sick to my stomach, livid, worried, anxious, and largely angry. Perhaps like me, you find yourself angry every time you see the news, at once wanting to scream into the abyss and choking back tears. I find myself in a perpetual state of wondering how close we are to a precipice, constantly wondering whether we can avoid going over the edge or if we're already in free fall. Or maybe we've already landed. Splat. The current administration is leaning heavily into empire language. We are told that we need to acquire more wealth, more oil, more strength, more land, more focus, more resources devoted to just us, more of the right kind of citizens. More of all this, and we will have peace and prosperity. It is language that empires have used since empires first began. Peace through strength. I wonder if the writers of the Gospels might not relate to this. They lived and wrote during a time under a harsh empire about the life and ministry of Jesus, a refugee child grown into a man who would ultimately be killed by the mechanisms of that harsh empire. The story sounds like pure tragedy. Yet all the while, the Roman Empire was experiencing its golden age of expansion, progress, security, and stability. Granted, it was expanding and increasing its so-called stability while crushing anyone unwilling to fall in line under its heel. It is within this framework that we encounter the story of Jesus' baptism. Each of the 4 Gospels has the story of Jesus being baptized by John. For each, this moment serves as a pivotal moment in the life and ministry of Jesus. Now, Mark, he's quick and dirty. John baptizes Jesus, the heavens split open, and the Spirit descends like a dove, with a voice saying something to the effect of, "You are my dearly loved Son, who brings me great joy." Luke takes a little more time with the same Spirit descending like a dove and the voice again saying something to the effect of, "You are my dearly loved Son, who brings me great joy." John is the most unique, as usual, and he adds lots of commentary about John the Baptist's understanding of what was happening during this moment, and it has the bit about the Spirit descending like a dove. Matthew takes a little time to have some dialogue between Jesus and John, possibly to address the potential embarrassment over having John baptize Jesus because of superiority concerns, or because of concerns over why Jesus would need to be baptized at all. It too ends with the heavens opening, the Spirit descending like a dove, and this time the voice says, "This is my dearly loved Son, who gives me great joy," instead of "You are my dearly loved Son." With each of the Gospels taking the time to describe this moment and this event, it's safe to say it's an important moment. Now, I'm going to save the topics of embarrassment over the baptism of Jesus and the you versus this difference for someone else who feels more comfortable analyzing these. Now, I really, really like literature, and I'm a pretty big fan of ancient literature, but I am by no stretch of the imagination a Roman or a Greek literature scholar. But I am no stranger to the idea of using symbolism to convey a deeper message. Some other scholars I read in preparing for this homily noted that birds were commonly viewed as messengers from the heavens. So it's really no surprise that a bird shows up here, as Jesus is singled out and identified by the heavens. Let's review the narrative from Matthew again. Jesus shows up to be baptized by John. There's some discussion that maybe it should be the other way around, but ultimately, John agrees, and he baptizes Jesus. The heavens open, and then a mighty eagle majestically soars in a flight glorious to behold, and a voice proclaims, oh, I see some confused faces. I must have gotten the story a little bit wrong. Yeah, I see what I did here. I got the wrong bird. The eagle was considered a symbol of might back then, just as it is today. It would have made so much sense to have an eagle appear here instead of a dove. Jesus is the Messiah, the chosen one, who will overthrow the empire and establish his rule. And this is his moment. The moment his work on earth starts in earnest. The moment in each of the Gospels that Jesus gets a definitive label. It would have made so much sense to use a bird traditionally viewed as fierce, strong, mighty. Except that's not what God wanted to communicate to us here. God was not interested in this being a moment for a show of strength. At this point in the gospel, we are transitioning to Jesus' actions as the Messiah. Matthew has already been preparing us for understanding Jesus is the Messiah. Matthew begins by expounding on Jesus' ancestry, his miraculous birth, affirmation by outsiders of his importance, fulfillment of prophecy by having his family flee first to Egypt and then relocate to Nazareth, and an explanation of John the Baptist's role in preparing the way for Jesus. This moment of Jesus' baptism is key in showing what kind of a Messiah Jesus will be. And the bird used to convey this is not an eagle, but a dove. Now, Jewish audiences might have immediately connected this image to the Old Testament creation story, where the Spirit of God hovered over the waters. It's hard not to. Jesus is literally in the water, and the dove is descending over him. Or they might have recalled Noah's dove, tasked with helping Noah discern when it was safe to leave the ark. Perhaps they thought of the doves used as an atoning sacrifice. Normally, I prefer to think about what a symbol would have meant to the author or to earlier audiences, not how modern audiences would perceive them. However, this is one time where I actually think it's helpful for us to reflect on how we currently view doves. Perhaps this is one of those times where a modern perspective adds another layer of richness to God's unveiling of who Jesus is in the moment of his baptism. Doves were a symbol of peace then, but doves are the symbol of peace now. This week has not been peaceful. But you know what? It wasn't peaceful when Jesus was baptized. As an infant, Jesus' family had to flee in order to avoid a genocide. According to other Gospels, by the time he was baptizing Jesus, John was already in the process of making waves and powerful enemies. We are going to hear about his arrest in the chapter right after this one. Tensions were rising. The author of Matthew and each of the other Gospels knows where the story is heading. Jesus will be crucified. He will rise again, but before that happens, great violence will occur. Yet at this moment, marking the beginning, where the heavens are opened up and God communicates who Jesus is, there is a dove. What does it mean to us to see the dove descending on Jesus in this moment? What does it mean as we sit here today watching a different empire with the same false narrative of peace through the strength of the empire? How does understanding the moment of Jesus' baptism as bathed and anointed in peace shape our understanding of Jesus as a whole? What does it mean to know that this moment, bathed in peace, was accompanied by a proclamation? This is my dearly loved Son, who makes me really happy. How might we engage our world differently, knowing that the moment marking the beginning of Jesus' ministry was anointed with this image of peace? These are not peaceful times, just as times were not peaceful then. What does it mean to be a people marked by peace when we are bombarded constantly with images and experiences of violence at the hands of individuals and of empires? Now, don't get me wrong here. There is a way to be a peaceful pacifist without being passive. This is not a license to do and say nothing when the empires of this world behave badly. Jesus certainly didn't. But it means something that the identity of the Messiah is founded on a peace symbol. As we are meant to follow Jesus, the Messiah, we too should be bathed in this character of the Spirit of peace, such that it is the foundation and the starting place for our own actions as followers of Jesus. How can we better identify with the baptism of Jesus, where the Spirit descended on the Messiah like a dove instead of an eagle? May we let this spirit of peace shape our own identities, just as it did for Jesus.